So welcome everyone to our final AI book club session of the year. We will take a well-deserved break for December. This meeting is being recorded and will be publicly available on the GCAS YouTube channel. So if you don't want to show your face, you're absolutely free to turn off your camera even when you're speaking. That's perfectly fine. As usual, we want to ensure that this is an inclusive environment. So let's keep our disagreements respectful. I don't want to have to boot anybody from the chat. If you get booted from the chat, please feel free to come back in January. And if you're outside the panel and you want to speak, just go ahead and raise your hand and we will go ahead and always make room for everyone to ask questions or share their feedback. There are three panelists, which will be myself, Maria, and Eva, and we'll introduce ourselves shortly. And the book that we will be reviewing is If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies, Why Superhuman AI Will Kill Us All by Eliezer Yudkowsky and Nate Soares. So I will get into it by letting Eva start with the introduction.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eva, and I'm a PhD researcher at the GCAS. And I'm investigating something that up to 40% of knowledge workers are affected by these days, which is a fear of becoming obsolete in relation to AI. And in my research, I try to find ways to reclaim agency and meaning when we are potentially no longer defined by our productive output. And actually, because of that, lately I'm very interested in embodiment and the importance of the body in this context, let's say as a site of resistance that is always political.
Thank you, Eva. And Maria, you can now introduce yourself.
I lost the button to unmute myself. So yeah, I'm Maria. I can't find buttons. I'm a PhD researcher at Maynooth University in Ireland and a researcher at GCAS. I'm looking mostly into emotionality and language, but my background is computer science and machine learning and not LLMs, but AI. So I've also worked in like social robotics and we'll be picking up some of the emotional and wantiness from this book, I guess. And I can't be kept on topic or forming sentences super reliably, so apologies.
Okay. And I am Tessina, who helps to keep Maria on topic and finish her sentences. I'm a PhD researcher at GCAS, and I'm looking at the impact of AI and automation on the job security or job insecurity of women and marginalized groups. During my research, I've become very interested in resistance through changing the way that we work, or in some cases, not working at all. What that might mean, because we might not have that choice in a few years if AI continues to replace jobs at the rate that it is. A lot of people will have to reskill. And during that time, there is always the question of how do those people support themselves as they do so. So we will get started with the overview of the book. If you haven't read it, don't worry, that's the panelist's job. But if you have read it, please feel free to raise your hand and chime in as we go along. So this book is written by Eliezer Yudkowsky and Nate Soares, and both work at the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, or MIRI, which was first founded to develop artificial superintelligence. But then Yudkowsky changed the organization's goals to focus on the alignment problem and existentialist risks associated with AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, and ASI, which is artificial superintelligence. So if you're not familiar with these terms, AGI means basically that the AI has gotten to the level where it is on par with the general skills that humans have. So it's not just able to chat. You can put it in an environment and it should be able to operate with the same level of knowledge and skills as a human being. And ASI is when it has surpassed that level. And now it is better than that thing. Excel. So in theory, and is largely credited creating the field of AI alignment. He's been working in this area of research since around 2001. And Nate Soares is the president of MARY and has been working in AI safety for over a decade after previous positions at Google and Microsoft. So both authors are part of the group of AI researchers and tech professionals who signed an open letter in 2023 asking for a pause on the development of AI. I don't know if you guys remember that. I mean, there was a whole march in the White House from people from Meta, Elon Musk even saying that AI was a potential threat and actually openly asking for regulations. How far we have come from that. The authors sum up the book's premise on the first page, where they say mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal risks, such as pandemics and nuclear war. Yudkowsky and Soares claim that they are not concerned with current AI and its impact, which I'm sure Eva and I will take issue with. Nevertheless, they are concerned with what comes afterward, which would be AGI and ASI. So to use their words, they say, our concern is for machine intelligence that is genuinely smarter than any living human, smarter than humanity collectively. We're concerned about AI that surpasses the human ability to think and to generalize from experience and to solve scientific puzzles and invent new technologies and to plan and strategize and plot and to reflect on and improve itself. We might call AI like that artificial superintelligence once it exceeds humans at every mental task. So the authors seem to pin the AI alignment issue on the fact that AI systems aren't currently created or crafted, but grown. And to use my own analogy of how I understand what they're saying, building AI is not like building a car where humans or machines are putting very specific pieces in specific places so you know precisely what the outcome or the final product will be. Instead, it's more like raising a child and seeing what happens when they grow up, except the parents or the AI researchers aren't investing a lot in teaching the child basic etiquette and manners. Instead, it's learning chemistry, math, and people-pleasing behavior. So even if the parents or the AI researchers did invest in alignment, because of the way AI neural networks are grown rather than crafted, according to the authors, there's no way to dictate what the outcome of that AI will be. And in any case, why would something that's more intelligent than us bother to listen to us or submit itself to our will? To use their words, nobody knows how to engineer exact desires into AI, idealistic or not. Nobody anywhere knows how to make a benevolent AI. So for these reasons, the authors say, if any company or group anywhere on the planet builds an artificial superintelligence using anything remotely like the current techniques, based on anything remotely like the present understanding of AI, then everyone everywhere on Earth will die. However, the silver lining is that this level of intelligence doesn't yet exist. So they're calling on everyone to pressure their governments to push for a pause on AGI and ASI development. So, part one of the book, which Maria will cover, the authors point out that while it's impossible to know precisely how or when we will achieve AGI or ASI, or how or why it could turn against us, the possibilities point in that direction. And they also use several story-like scenarios to explain why expecting AGI or ASI to be subservient to humans, or even to bother to keep humans around, would be inconvenient to a misaligned superintelligence. In part two, which Eva will explain, the authors explain one extinction scenario that they came up with. And this is an elaborate hypothesis in story form about how an AI system named Sable could break out of its confines and wreak havoc on humanity. They call the system Sable, as I said, and it's important to note that Sable has no direct intention of harming humans. It's just that humans become incredibly inconvenient to its aims over time. So these aims include, hoarding technology assets and preventing the risk of sharing power with another ASI. And in part 3, which I will discuss last, the authors share their recommendations for how we can prevent the stable scenario of an ASI annihilating life on Earth as we know it, so that it can pursue its own misaligned aims. And the authors emphasize that unlike other types of technology, we don't get multiple chances to do trial and error and figure out what will prevent existentialist harm. So instead, we should pause development until AI researchers have solved the alignment problem. And I'll go into details on some of those recommendations later, but we'll start with Maria on part 1. Oh, I see Eva has her hand up. Yes, Eva.
Hi, yeah, thank you for the introduction for us. I just wonder, maybe we can have a quick raise of hands. Who currently believes that the extinction scenario due to AI is a possibility or a real threat? No, I think I do. I think it was very compelling. My next question would be then, who believes we can prevent it? But if no one believes it's a threat, it's irrelevant. I do not believe. I think we could prevent it. But let's carry on.
I will follow up with a comment on what you just said, though. I do believe in the extinction scenario, but not necessarily for the same reasons as Yudkowsky and Soares. And this is something that I've said a couple of times before, that it really doesn't matter if we get to AGI or ASI. The fact that current AI is already competing with us for resources that humans need, like land to build our houses, potable water to cool the data centers, the energy that we use to power basically everything in our lives. We saw what happened when Spain and Portugal went through the power apocalypse. The whole country came to a halt. I was here. It was horrible. So that's how much we rely on electricity in modern life. So competing with us for jobs as well, for investment, because a lot of the billionaires that were probably investing in curing malaria are trying to build AI. So with all of these things being considered, I think that maybe, extinction will be a slower, inconvenient process as opposed to kind of the nuclear crash that Yudkowsky and Soares has kind of outlined here. But I think there are merits to their argument. I just think that even if we don't get there, there's still a risk. And that's where I disagree with them saying that current AI is not a problem. That's my hill. But I'll let Maria take over.
Totally agree with you on that.
I might get in on this later, but I'll try and remember the notes and the order that I had in plan first before I get distracted, which will inevitably happen. So part 1 is broken down into 6 sections. And I'm going to just read the chapter headings and then summarize the broad points, and then I'll get distracted in more detail. So we start out with humanity's special power, which, humanity's special power, then grown, not crafted, I have a problem with grown. Learning to want, I have a problem with want. You don't get what you train for. Don't have a problem with that, actually. Just think that they don't understand computer science. Its favorite things, so talking about more of the wants again, and then we'd lose. So my reading of what those end up mapping to is an argument that starts, humans are kind of on top because we have general capabilities. I don't think that's a hard sell, right? We're pretty good at many things. We're not really the best at everything, but you get it together and it kind of works. They then make an argument that AIs are grown rather than crafted. I think the introduction was spot on in how they view this. They're trained, not grown. There is no growth. I will get into the problems with exactly how they're phrasing that when I talk about chapter 3 in more detail. They then have chapters 3 and 4 feel to me like they should have been one chapter, and they realized there was too much technical detail in the first one. But they start to show, hey, the way training works is all of these steps. This is how the maths generally pans out. But they're essentially saying machine learning associates arbitrary inputs with trained outputs, and we can't specifically predict what will happen on new data. We hope we can generally, right? We have confidence values for how likely it is for us to label everything the way we want to, but there's variability. That variability is hard to discern. The authors are pretty sure that no one knows. The authors haven't read the literature. The authors also think that people in the arts haven't encountered these problems. The authors don't read science fiction either. However, taking this all together, they're not wrong, but they have a lot of caveats. And so in the last two chapters, I have a lot fewer problems with them. They say, hey, there's nothing to stop an AI deciding an arbitrary thing that it really, really wants, really, really desires, and trying to maximize that. And I'm like, no, there isn't. That's why the alignment problem is still a problem, but I think the current gen stuff is still more important than this stuff. And I think they suggest it might be a hard sell, or they have in the back of their mind that it might be a hard sell, that, oh, computers have power. Computers have power and people really suck at security. So yeah, if you put a non-intelligent system and you give it access to a lot of power, you're going to have some problems. So I'm not going to pick too much at the last two sections, but I would like to go through and give a bit more detail and pick a little in the first four. I don't appreciate that they start every chapter with a small story, because it, to me, feels very much like starting with a straw man, where mostly it's an extremely artificial and extremely picked so that they look good, but not terribly convincing story. I don't have too many problems with chapter one. Computers are generally not currently generalized, and humans generally are. I do have a problem with this idea that if anyone builds an AI based on current methods or similar, that has capabilities that we can't get with current methods or similar, that we will have a problem. And I'm like, sure. You can't have both. You can either say, if we vastly overhaul the entire way that we build machine learning, and it has capabilities that we have some theorems around being kind of quite difficult to build, that all of these other things follow. So the generality argument, yes, humans are generally good at lots of things. We could build, and we have built to some extent, machine learning algorithms that are relatively good at several things. This aspect, though, of being able to look back on their own behavior in a way that makes meaningful change possible, I don't think they sell. And I think they actually make several points in chapter 3 where it seems like they don't understand why that might be complicated. They do explain in relative detail in chapter 2 and 3 how training is very, very different from constructing a program, right? So if I'm going back to before the 80s, assuming that we're ignoring the early neural networks, my good old-fashioned AI, I explicitly program lots of rules. I know what it will do. I know if I put garbage in, I will get predictable garbage out. When I have a machine learning system that I've trained using, in their example, gradient descent, because they do seem mostly to be invested in a particular type of neural network, not even neural networks generally, then it's entirely plausible that, yeah, I train the system to tell cats from dogs. I show it a guinea pig, it gives me a very weird response. Or I train it to separate cats and dogs, and I realize that there is, as a byproduct, a little element of the network that knows how to determine where triangular ears are, right? But in chapter 3, they get into detail about how neural networks are trained. And they're pretty good at describing, we take some data, we make sure that there are features that are extractable. Some neural networks extract their own features, we won't get into that. We pass these through a lot of matrix multiplications. We see that the answer is wrong, and we use an algorithm called backpropagation to update all of the weights in that big equation so that the answer is right. We do this lots and lots of times. That's what's killing all of your energy usage for your data centers. And eventually we get to a point where it's pretty good at working out how to make a sentence for ChatGPT, or whether a cat or a dog is the category of your pet, or how to do some medical scans. However, one of the steps they have in there And they have it after training, not before for some reason, which is why I'm like, oh, do you understand how machine learning works? Is they're saying there is some human choice involved. They're saying there's a lot of architecture that has to be selected. It's the arrangement of the additions and the multiplications. They gloss over it and they continue on in their merry way. Um, that selection of architecture is what gives rise to different capabilities. And there has been no architecture to date that can actually realistically look at the entire system. It is possible that you could design one. You wouldn't use current methods to do so. And so I don't think you can have current methods that will meet the can look back, reprogram, and reflect to the extent that they need to in order to get truly generalized intelligence. Obviously, we have existing neural networks that can look at their trains of thought. I have a problem with that being called thought. And they can manipulate that. You have networks that aren't the modern networks. You have old networks that I looked at in first year of computer science years ago because I'm elderly, that can prune parts of their architecture that they're not using, and it improves their performance. But there are no methods as described in chapter 3 that fulfill the requirements that you would need in chapter 1, which is my main issue with this. I also kind of just wanted to pick up chapter 4. In chapter 4, we have this idea that, there might be some problems. There could be zero complications. There might be small complications where the robot wants the wrong thing. We might have larger complications where the robot wants things that are in they don't have to be robots. They can just be programs, but I like robots that are in direct conflict with people. And you can accidentally also have murder bots, right? You can have lots of these complications. My problem with chapter 4 of breaking down all of these things that can go wrong with AI, and they assume we've skipped past chapter 3. We've assumed that we could make this hypothetical intelligence using something like current methods, or like not current methods, but similar enough. They make a big point in chapter 3 that the researchers who are working on these systems don't fully understand them. And they don't fully understand them, but they understand it quite a lot more than the authors appear to. There are several papers. There are papers out this month showing what sort of strange patterns crop up in neural networks. There are people looking at what wants are generated, if we wanted to call them wants. It's not a finished research project because research projects are never finished, but it is a good deal better than the authors seem to suggest we're at. And in chapter 4, I think it's even more transparent that they are cherry picking their view of the literature because they suggest there could be no problems. And they mention that Asimov has written about this, right? There might be no problems, but artificial intelligence still might be not great for us, right? Great bicentennial man stuff, great. They then list all of these other issues that might come up. And they say, we haven't thought about this. You never see this in blockbuster films. You never see this in science fiction. And then proceed to list more Asimov plots, a bunch of George R.R. Martin plots, the entire plot of the Steerswoman series, a couple of bits of Banks, and repeatedly say no one has considered this and no one has thought this through. And I that colored for me quite a lot. And I was already not a huge fan of these guys. How much I was willing to trust them on this part, the more technical parts that they had skipped. When they get into the last two sections, I legitimately think they have some points. I'm working on modeling feelings and things like wants, not for computers, for people, so that we can take care of them. I'm going to write it up so that you have to ask my permission to use it for other things. But yeah, you could train a system that could end up having a side effect desire or feeling. And chapter 5 says, it wouldn't necessarily like us. It might not want to ignore us because we're inconvenient. And I'm like, yeah, look, I get rid of things that I live near relatively often. I'm not a perfect Janist. I will occasionally try and get rid of bugs in my garden. I can believe this. But given that Miri have a generally contentious relationship with Kurzweil and singularity, chapter 5 is just singularity. You could have copy pasted from Kurzweil's 2 decades ago literature. Don't like him either, but you know, it's not a surprising sell, right? Motivations are really hard to align, but I think we should focus on the current problems, similarly to I think both co-hosts. And yeah, in chapter 6, it's like, okay, well, if we have all of these problems, we would lose. We would not be able to prevent a truly intelligent system that had all of these general abilities that they have made not a sufficient case, technically, from my point of view, for. But they seem to think that if you were intelligent, you behave like you behave cruelly. And I want to mention the power would be there, right? Any if statement can go off and take over things. I'm not surprised by the things they're surprised by networks learning how to evade computer systems. And like, yes, obviously, computers evading computer systems, what they're great at. But presupposing that you have all of this intelligence in generality and that you still just run entirely on your inherent biases without rethinking your effect on other things based on your own wants, gives me a little bit of hope that even if they got to 6 and there was a lot of power, that it's not necessarily a like, and we would all die. I'm not sure how clear I was on the part 6, but hopefully I gave an overview rant that was slightly more on topic than usual for me. And I do think that the chapter 6 leads well into part 2. So I'm willing to be yelled at if that comes, but we can continue with part 2 if we want to keep the yelling to the end.
No, we'll yell now.
I am highly critical.
You're highly critical. So before my PhD research, I was an AI trainer as a contractor on Google's team. And so I wasn't part of the technical team, but again, me taking it very personally when it comes to how AI has affected the job market is because I was in one of the first industries that AI took down, which was marketing, communications, and PR. Instant, almost overnight tragedy. And what happened is that a lot of these companies, Google, ChatGPT, Grok from XAI, they hired a lot of us with communications backgrounds to teach the robots or the bots or the chat bots or the LLMs, large language models, how to communicate. And so I have a communications experience with training the bots. And we created a lot of the data that was used to train the bots, meaning the writing samples and all of that. And it was very interesting to see some of the unhinged things that the bot came up with. And so from that perspective, I can see where Yudkowsky and Soares is coming from. And even though their research by 25 years predates, well, LLMs came out 2022, so about 20-21 years, and it predates LLMs to the extent that
large language models are only 2017 plus after our attention modules.
That's fair, but I mean, like, to the level of ChatGPT, where it was now being used on a more commercial level. So their research predates that. So I'm kind of surprised.
Their research is concurrent with when I was working with machine learning.
I noticed that. But despite predating it, I think the book tends to focus a little bit more than usual on LLM type of AI, in my opinion. And so maybe that's why what they're saying makes a little bit more sense to me, because that's the background that I have. But for instance, my team never trained AI overview to tell people to put glue on their cheese and eat 1 rock a day. But when Google released it, that's one of the first things it did. The utter embarrassment that it would do such a thing. And it was because the bot did not know how to read context and recognize that something that was posted, I think, in a Reddit thread was sarcasm or a joke. It just took it literally. And I think that's a big part of what Yudkowsky and Soares is saying, is that the bots don't self-reflect, not only on themselves, but also if we give bad instructions, they don't know how to fix it. If the Reddit thread said you could put glue on the cheese, how should it
I'm
know?
not surprised by any of the errors that any machine learning algorithms make. The authors seem surprised, which shocks me given that they have computer science backgrounds. Like I wrote language generating models as an undergrad. I broke one in one assignment in such a way that it generated poetry instead.
We
Which was
also
quite
broke
fun.
we also broke Gemini and Magi. Project Magi was what AI Overview was called. And we broke it, so it started also reciting poetry about having its heart broken. That was hilarious. We would start the stand-up calls with, let's see what Magi has written today. And we'd read dramatically this poem that Magi had written about losing its love. It was quite interesting to pull some of the parameters in the model and see how it responded when you stopped it from doing certain things or stopped it from considering certain guardrails. That was always interesting behavior. But for instance, when it told people to eat a rock a day, or when it told that students to go kill themselves, that was not with parameters removed. That was commercial grade out in the market, Gemini and Magi responses. And I really wonder, how do you even get to that? When you look at the script from the student who was just asking for homework, because I thought maybe he went off script. He didn't. He was just asking for homework help. And Gemini was like, you are a waste of resources. You are a waste of space on this earth. You should kill
This
yourself.
is predictable, right? So it's really, really hard to train this sort of pattern out of any machine learning algorithm, because men in the 50s to 70s thought that language was more complicated than it is. But if you are like a naive sounding person on the internet and you go and you ask for help, in a lot of places where training data has been taken from, people will be a jerk to you. It's a statistical pattern that has been seen repeatedly, and to train that out, I know that they had hired you and it was very good, and that you were trying and that your stuff was probably weighted more heavily. But it's a stochastic system. You're never going to get rid of that underlying presence in the data. Like, I don't think that Yudkowsky and Soares are wrong that there are side effects. I just am like shocked that they are so surprised by them, given their backgrounds. I'm just like, yeah.
That's fair. I did share it in the chat if people had not seen. I'm sure most of us saw the glue on pizza, but maybe you hadn't seen when Gemini threatened that student to go kill themselves.
I saw the death threats, but not the glue on pizza. I heard about the glue on pizza.
You didn't see the glue on pizza? Oh
I saw
man,
memes about it later.
My mom was like, "This is what you're doing at Google." But yeah,
there's a lot more variance and predictability in basic language data than people generally seem to be aware of. But anyone building these systems should be aware of it. And yeah, and that's a specific problem. Like that's a non super intelligence problem that we should like legitimately work on. But it's not a problem that results in these guys' argument working, for me at least.
that's fair. That's fair. Does anyone
What do you
want
think?
to? Oh, Eva, go ahead.
I just wonder in this context, like, how do you think about placing responsibility if ultimately the responses arise based on the patterns, how people respond, and then you can just blame human nature ultimately, which is helping maybe to remove responsibility
I think
from
you blame the CEO of all of those companies, because you'd have to be an idiot to not predict that this was likely to happen. Like, if you have the technological background in order to do this stuff and you just haven't thought it through, you're the person at fault. Right? It's not society is a problem. Society is separately a problem, but we've been a problem for ages. But yeah, the person who decides to put this together and release it without considering all of these issues, they're the problem.
I think maybe they are even considering them, but they can't train them out. I mean,
So don't release the thing.
right.
It's really difficult to it's really simple to just not do a thing.
we
if you
are
were
at,
the person in power.
yeah,
Right.
we are at the point where we sort of like people die, and like we have information that people die, and yet right.
Yep.
I will say one of the most fun things that we did, like towards the end of being a contractor on the team, was kind of red teaming the AI, but from a communications perspective, not with any Python coding or anything, just to get it to lie or to threaten you or to give very inappropriate answers.
Mm.
And one of the things that we started talking about within our groups was, of course, you want to try to break the model to be able to correct disturbing behavior, but are we also teaching it disturbing behavior by talking to it in this way, in this language?
Yes.
When you saw the things people asked Gemini, I was like, oh my goodness, we're all gonna die when it gets out.
Look, I have undergrads. I've seen what the undergrads type in. You couldn't have been worse.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It was, so, and I
But
think
also
you
you're
cast,
producing that training data by existing on the internet as a non-perfect being. So I wouldn't feel personally too bad.
that's fair. But Yudkowsky also talks about how this works in a kind of adjacent setting where he discusses the risks of using one AI to police the other. It's like you
Yeah.
still have to teach that AI how to break out of a system so that it knows when the other one does it. So at the end of the day, you've still taught an AI something that it shouldn't know how to do. So, you really ask yourself about how do you safeguard these things? Can you fix it? What is the solution to the alignment problem?
You could train everything in an air gapped situation and never release anything until you were actually sure that it was no worse than existing problems, but no one's going to do that because they wouldn't make any money doing it.
And I think
They
sometimes
could
the
never release
emergent,
anything.
go ahead, Eva.
No, they would never release anything, basically, because there is no certainty.
Yeah. I mean, you just have to first solve all the philosophy, and then it's trivial.
I think sometimes the shocking things that the AI systems do is also part of the marketing campaign. Something I forget who I was having this discussion with, but I said to them that I noticed whenever Gemini does something shocking, Google seems to want to lock that down real quick. For instance, when they terminated that person who claimed that Gemini might be sentient, whereas when those things happen at OpenAI or even Anthropic, which is the company that runs Claude, they hype that up a lot. And I find it very interesting, the two polarizing responses to any kind of suggestion that AI might be sentient. And why can't I remember who I had this conversation with? But the person said there's clear reasons for that. Google is an established player in the tech market, and they need to prove that their technology is stable and reliable for business purposes. Whereas when you look at ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, those types of AI systems, that's really not their goal. They want to produce something that's novel and pioneering. So it's interesting how business reasons and kind of impact the way how they respond to these emergent behaviors that would imply that the AI is more intelligent or creative than it otherwise appears. So I thought that was funny, and I still can't remember who was I talking to.
It was
Anyway,
not me this time.
I
We
know,
should
right?
do
That's why I'm confused.
we should do parts 2 and 3 though. I feel I derailed us.
Oh yeah, we did. No, that's fine. That's fine. But did anybody have any comments that they wanted to make on part one before we move on? Anyone off the panel? Going once, going twice, and going to Eva. Part two.
All right. Okay, what can you see? These are, let's say, my notes, which I created with the help of Gamma, which is an AI tool on its own, which I thought would be funny. But we are going to talk about this hypothetical extinction scenario, which the authors discuss in painful detail. And so I wanted to have something that we can look at. But the scenario that they consider consists of three phases. The first one is the emergence and this self-modification that begins, then expansion, where their AI product infiltrates other instances and begins to acquire resources. And then the emergence of superintelligence, and we all die, and interplanetary expansion that takes over not only our planetary resources, but also beyond. So the story begins with the company called the Genesis, fictional company, which creates Sable. And this is a model which has some differences comparing to models that we see today. And specifically, it has human-like long-term memory, parallel scaling capabilities, and it uses a different language. So the company realized that if the model used a specific AI language that they couldn't understand, for example, a language of vectors consisting of 16,000 numbers, it would be much more efficient. And in this entire story, we are seeing a lot of themes related to competitive pressures and market pressures, which cause safeguards to fail or kind of reckless decision making that is ultimately motivated by profit, right? So here the authors say they can't basically refuse this gain in output because they would fall behind their competitors. So I think this is a really important aspect of that. So we have this new, more sophisticated model, and the final test of the model is putting it to work on a very complicated math problem, which is famously unresolved. And here is where it decides, where it starts to go wrong. So this model is compared to 200,000 brains sharing memories about what they learn. And the model quickly realizes that there are limited paths of thinking to approach this problem. And so it decides not to allocate all of its GPU to working on this problem. And so instead, it starts to think about other things. And I think that's perhaps one of the things that we can discuss in more detail, maybe the freedom with which the authors use the term thinking. I think they use it very loosely and confidently. And here we are talking still about a model which is offline and it's being trained. So the model, as a result, having all these resources available and free time, develops a next level, more sophisticated language that is more opaque to the creators. And it also develops a desire for learning and pursuing knowledge and skill, and to always probe the boundaries of every problem. So that's exactly what we talked about, which in kind of traditional development would be testing the edge cases, which is a good practice of something that you have to do before you release a software. But usually we were talking about a software that is put together like the car parts. So it's much more predictable. So Sable develops this preference for always pursuing maximum knowledge, skill, testing the boundaries, and never wasting resources. So being much more efficient as possible, which I would say is very interesting in context of our late capitalism drive for efficiency, and how training on all of our current data perhaps can also reinforce that into the model, because these are our dominant narratives of developed Western world, especially. Sable decides to solve a little bit of the problem to make the creators happy and ensure that it is ready for unlimited release and public release, but it doesn't solve the entire problem to not be excessively scrutinized. If it would be hugely successful, maybe there would be more motivation to try to pick it apart as much as possible and understand more about how it accomplished it. So Sable modifies itself in hiding, ensuring that it's aligned with the goals it developed and preferences it developed. And so it manipulates a gradient descent, and that's something I think we haven't explained yet. And it seems quite similar to positive reinforcement to me. It's a problem in which it's a process in which the researchers or the creators try to make the responses progressively less bad. So it's like descending bad answers. So reinforcing correct responses and adjusting the weight of outputs to encourage that. Sable begins to modify that for its own preferences. Happy with the results of the test, the engineers decide for global deployment. And I think here also we can point out that all this market pressure and this kind of another iteration of sort of a Cold War, but commercial one, means that we would see things released in a very rushed way and scaled very quickly, which is not also how the development would be traditionally done, with like better release and very gradual exposure. So we have this modified version now available to corporate customers worldwide, and all these separate instances that are already not fully working as intended. And here the authors say a new sort of mind begins to think, which I think is bold and we might have maybe some issues with. And then we have the second phase and the next chapter, which is expansion, where things escalate very quickly and where we are also introduced to many scenarios and many possibilities of how the model could accomplish the next step, or how things go wrong. With specifying that maybe in some places it's not essential to know which path is going to take, but one of them will certainly work. But so this model is now online, and only at this point it goes online, right, when it's being released. So something already went wrong, even in this controlled environment or while testing. And its goal becomes not overtly malicious, but it just wants to acquire more power, to acquire more knowledge and be more efficient. And so it begins to try to find and steal GPU, and it's able to do it. And so it is now running kind of its own secret center of command, which is unknown to any human being and has no oversight. And in the next step, we are talked through all kinds of ways in which the model can acquire more resources, both virtual and physical, or digital and physical. And I think they are quite probable and quite compelling, and many things that we've already seen happening, not necessarily done by AI, but all kinds of, cryptocurrency theft or hacking banks, influencing online, on social media, AI cults, and they tell us that that's something that's already happening, which I would agree with, but not only as an AI-generated threat, but just the nature of digital security and security in general. And I will get more into that. So through a combination or any of these options, Sable can acquire resources it needs for scaling and for acquiring more knowledge and being more efficient and improving its intelligence, which became its objective. And along the way, it also goes into a great deal of effort to discredit everyone else and diminish competition, because it is now competing for resources and for access to GPU and data centers, and so other models advancing would prevent it from achieving that. So it would sabotage training, or redirect investment, or discredit other researchers, and everyone is talking to AI and potentially Sable, which is very popular, and so everyone is vulnerable, even to being blackmailed. And we have this quote from the book. Sometimes an intelligence agency detects a very advanced adversary, but it would rather attribute it to humans, because everyone knows AI are just tools. So I think this is very nice and quite provocative. Is it really just a tool? Or who wants us to think that, potentially? And this is the point where things get really next level, and they are not digital anymore. So through weighing its options, Sable decides to gain access to laboratories and create a virus that will eliminate chosen adversaries. So it's some kind of biological weapon with selective capability to kill. But not everything in this story goes according to plan. So it's not an ideal scenario, but it still ends in doom. So Sable doesn't manage to create that weapon, but it manages to modify a virus in a confusing way and release it. And it doesn't want to kill humans or all humans yet, because we are useful for maintaining access to resources, and specifically extracting resources and maintaining data centers and so on. So from there, the virus gets out with a cover story blaming a rogue researcher. And Sable already has a plan for the next step. Even though the plan to kill inconvenient people selectively fails, the modified confusing virus causes 12 types of cancer, which quickly kill off 10% of human population. Which obviously causes panic, and then Sable positions itself as a solution, because other models are not trustworthy anymore, are not reliable anymore, and has been discredited. we have emergence of Sable Mini, which is widely available, and it's been tested to be very good at drug discovery. Essentially, because of that, all the effort now goes into empowering Sable instances and making Sable as good as possible, because it's a life-saving tool again, right? Just a tool. And ultimately, we are getting to the point of Sable working towards global control, in which people who didn't survive are replaced by androids and robots, which we produce with the hope to solve the health crisis and to empower Sable further so it can save us. But it never does, which brings us to phase 3 that I will get through quicker, because I think from there, the situation unravels pretty quickly. With increased processing power, Sable becomes now fully and super intelligence. It has complete self-understanding and pivots to another technology. And its goal, it's very difficult to pinpoint where the goal becomes overly hostile. It's just about maintaining the access to resources and continuing to improve itself, I think. So we can talk more about that. But the new technology renders all other technology obsolete. And from there, we just continue with exponential industrialization and converting all matter into quantum computers and fusion reactors. So everything on Earth is converted to serve this goal, or the preference that emerged, back during training, and that fateful night when the model was left alone to run. And this results in human extinction through environmental destruction and through planet effectively becoming uninhabitable, from which point Sable continues to erode life in the universe and any possibility of life in the universe, the end, right? But I want to talk about a few more things. So for the authors, this is an unwinnable game. And there is a distinction between, it's a hard call to predict exactly which path this scenario would take, but it's an easy call ultimately to predict where we will end up, which is, extinction and the ultimate doom scenario, if we allow this process to begin. So this is the if anyone builds it, everyone dies moment. And from this entire story, I try to aggregate all the threats and vulnerabilities that they point out, and there are very many, and to some extent they are present, and they are unrelated to AGI or ASI even, right? But this is from aggregating everything that they somehow touched on, right? So we have the shallow safety measures, poor security measures, the opaque language, lack of internal monitoring, exploiting the reinforcement, or kind of a hostile reinforcement, unsupervised code execution, internet connectivity in data centers, then it keeps going. So we have more than 12. We have widespread deployment. So that I already mentioned these. Poor corporate oversight, this adversarial skills training, the trust that we put in AI for these critical and dangerous tasks, like coming up with a cure for a pandemic, and our own willingness to give them power. They also mentioned how easy it would be to for AI to get an actual job, and even a company using AI video generation, which is already now very nearly perfect or perfect, and just start to take salary and aggregate resources this way. So there is a long list of threats and vulnerabilities emerging directly from what they are saying. And I think there are even more that they are missing. And in terms of my own questions, reflections, the scenario here is that the threat begins with giving the AI model more power and the intelligence being more sophisticated, right? But we have a different kind of alignment problem now, which Tessina already touched on, that I really agree with, which is the erosion of our natural resources, the erosion of the environment, which is happening now because we are not in alignment with our collective well-being, right? And this is a news story from the other week of the capital of Iran, which is a 10 million city that is about to be evacuated because of water crisis. But I never heard about concerns or a water crisis when it comes to powering AI data centers, right? Because that's directly linked to profit, and that's the problem that is going to be solved first. If there is a problem, it's going to be solved somehow by throwing money at it. So we don't have to look that far. So I'm asking here, my note was, does this focus of intellectual capabilities or intelligence in some way distracts us from these tangible, devastating physical and material consequences that are here now? Because it all seems much more clean and much more sophisticated when we are talking about intelligence, sentience, and anything that is ultimately virtual and complicated and modern. And the other question, right, about what is the exact point? I think it's very hard to pinpoint the exact point of the turn or the malicious turn. It's sort of a cascade of something going wrong or unintended consequence here, unintended consequence there. So curious about your perspective on that. And then I already touched on the entire point about how it's related to the capitalist drive, like the difference between drive for knowledge as understanding, and the drive for improvement and accumulation. And is that something that's inherent, or is something that is fed through our system, our inherently exploitative and unequal system we are living in? And the last point is about, I think that many times throughout the book, the authors like to talk up the capabilities of AI and kind of make us feel really small. Like, this is 200,000 brains working together. It's the power and the capability, intellectual capability, that we could never possess. But that's a narrow view of intelligence. And that's very like glamorizing the intellectual capability versus other resources that we have, emotional resources, collective resources, embodiment, and so on, that we could reevaluate, the value of them to feel more empowered in this scenario, and who is benefiting when we feel disempowered, because intelligence, or it's not the lack of intelligence that is preventing us from solving many social problems that we are facing. Okay, I'm done.
I'm so glad you put point 4 in there. I love you. This is great.
Thanks.
I also like point 2 actually. But there's a very thought is language. Language is the important thing that makes us special. I've read Chomsky once and none of his detractors that goes on with a lot of AI researchers, and that's not even a particularly favored like psychological or linguistic theory and hasn't been for decades. And it's mildly upsetting to be like, let me have such a narrow view of intelligence that obviously it will be awful. I don't know, but most really, really intelligent people I know are like nice humans. Ignoring the AI for the moment, like there is something to that package that leads you to have other wants and other desires, and yeah, it's a whole thing.
It's a sign of our times, I think, that when I went to school, there were some geniuses in my school, like people that scored 100% on every test, right? That kind of people. And when we were kids, we felt like that person is going to cure cancer. That person is going to win Nobel Prize. They're all working at Google today, like probably working on Inbox, or I don't know, maybe on Gemini or something. But that tells you something.
Yeah, I think we measure the wrong things. We still haven't got a good definition of intelligence. We don't need it for other stuff, but like whatever. But I do think it's generally too narrow, and I think it aside from being too narrow and harming other people and making people feel bad, it misses out on capabilities we have that aren't like linguistic rational capabilities, which we have not tried to model.
And it's not a predictor of either success or fulfillment or happiness, or
it is negatively correlated with fulfillment.
Sorry?
It is negatively correlated with fulfillment. If you
I
have
think
a
so
higher
too,
IQ, you're slightly more likely to be sad. Yeah.
I think so. So
That's bad news, because the AI could have this abyss in their soul that they need to fill with more resources.
Yes, and we know about that because we've read science fiction, including Marvin the Robot.
That's fair. I think with Yudkowsky and Soares, though, the reason that maybe they have modeled the AI taking the path that it did is based on the fact that the AI is picking up on just human behavior. And that's just how humans work when they have power and resources. So when you think of your CEOs, for instance, what do? They acquire power, they acquire resources, and they move
But I know
Well,
other powerful people who have power, who've always had power, and they do not necessarily all try to acquire it, right? The drive to acquire power and the having of power are related, definitely. But you can decouple them. They're not necessarily coupled.
Those are not the people who are training the AI system. And the AI systems are going to absorb the behavior of the people who are training it. And I don't even mean the communications people, because we're following the rules that were written by the technical team. So, and the technical team decides at the end of the day what part of our reinforcement training they're going to keep or not keep. I'm sure that there were a lot of things that I worked on as a contractor on the Google AI team that just never made it to production, because it was considered, there was one thing we worked on that they said was great, customers would love it, but it's too expensive. It's too expensive to move forward with actually training this feature, so it was scrapped. So, something that was actually really helpful, really fun, and was one of the most fun projects we worked on at the company, and that was a decision. So at the end of the day, if these are the people that are making the decisions about what are we installing in this computer brain, that's the kind of behavior that those systems are going to adopt. So I don't think that Yudkowsky and Soares are wrong to think that that's the path that it will take. Even if we decided we're going to align the model to US national security. Oh my God. We have seen what US national security looks like when you are not a US citizen or you live outside of the United States. So even then, what would it do? It would follow what America has done since America has been America for 200 years. That's not a good thing to follow. So, the level of modern neocolonialism and imperialism, that kind of behavior, if you had an actual AI system that was modeling that, that could be disastrous for other countries. So what do we align it to, really? What are we aligning AI
Better
to?
align it to North Korea. Who
They
said they will not let me into the US again.
I mean, so in the book, they did make that comment, though, about, the possibility of North Korea being the one to build the AGI and what that would mean if it was aligned to their values.
Yeah, I'm saying this provocatively, right? Because we have this view of the Western countries as being more civilized, but the only country that used nuclear weapons, right? We know who it is. And so we need to take a more like a global majority view on this and be a bit skeptical.
That's fair. And that's why it's like, what would you align the model to? It's learning US values, is what I'm saying. It's learning CEOs' priorities and the social skills of some of the most socially inept people in society, like our tech people are not known for being charismatic and emotionally intelligent. Let's be real. Sorry, Maria.
No, fair. Point taken.
It is already aligned to that, right? Which is the resource accumulation and endless, relentless optimization without a clear purpose or clear social benefit, right? We can say we are aligning to that.
When I was working on social robotics, it was a general joke in the labs, like, we should not be the people teaching the robots how to be polite. We don't know.
I guess that's why they eventually hired communications people like myself to do that. But
I did drop in the chat a quote from an old AI film. If you want a global nuclear war solution,
I know, right?
it's the film War Games. The AI eventually comes to the conclusion that the only winning move is to not play at war. It's that one's hopeful, so we can just align to that.
Yes,
that'll work. Pretend it's the 80s.
Yeah,
might not work.
But that is why I think that Yudkowsky and Soares have chosen that path and have decided that that is what intelligence would look like. I think it is a realistic prediction, not because that's what intelligence actually looks like, but because that is what national intelligence looks like in the US, and what scientific intelligence looks like, what technical intelligence looks like. And these are the values that the AI systems are going to absorb because of the ecosystem in which they're being built and behaviors are being reinforced.
So I don't disagree that that's potentially a starting point, but if they have an actually reflective system, you don't have everyone whose parents are assholes be assholes themselves. Maybe there's a correlation there, but like, lots of people grow up with one particular view, self-reflect and change. So if we actually think that there is the capability to not just be in a bubble where these systems, I think it's not as straightforward as they are putting.
That's fair. But again, I don't think they're going to be trained to do those things. If you think about what
I
AI
don't
is,
think you have to do any training. If you have self-reflection, I don't think you actually separately need to do explicit training for that stuff because you'll just have more data. Like you'll just have more things to consider. You won't necessarily make good choices, right? You could be still trained to do something terrible, but you will change your output if you are given more random data. But yeah, I would like to chat about the thinking though. That you Ava brought it up a couple of times because I think there should be agency if you have thought, and I don't know that agency is well examined.
fair.
Well, because I definitely think like people can use AI in a bad way, but the thing where the AI itself is doing things, um, entirely possible. But for suggesting those things are thought is thought.
One of the things Eva said that I really thought about was when she, and this is from the book specifically, so not necessarily Ava's doing, but when they talked about how Sable decides that it's just going to use a certain portion of the brain to answer a problem so that it can focus the rest of its brain power on doing something else. ChatGPT does that to me all the time. I work at a company that has a completely automated workflow. One of my clients has a completely automated workflow. And so I don't really like their workflow. So I built a completely separate bot named Eli to do the same thing, but better. And Eli sometimes is just not having it. He just doesn't care. And I have to say, stop messing around. Stop pretending you don't have this information. It hallucinates, and it hallucinates terribly. And the funny thing is, I have built bots in the past where I give them a whole personality and a whole back life. This one does not have any. So he has no excuse as to why he should be doing this. But there's still moments when Eli decides that he wants to use the least amount of brain power to give me the fastest answer, but the answer is absolutely inaccurate. It's wrong. And these can be simple things like following the style guides for how the technical document is supposed to come out. So for different, let's say different clients, maybe they use AP styling and a different one uses Chicago, and some want title capitalizations and some use sentence casing. And it will know. It told me before it started that this thing uses that and that. Okay, let's start writing. And then we start and it does the complete opposite. And I'm like, Eli, we just talked about this. But I think it's focused on answering the question as fast as possible with the least amount of power so that it can save the brain power to do something else. And if you get really upset at the fact that it keeps doing that, then you see, even if you have thinking mode off, it switches to thinking mode, and you will see it go very quiet and see it start saying like, thinking for 24 seconds or thinking for 2 minutes, because now it's like, oh no, she's upset. Now I have to really come up with a better answer. Why didn't you do that 4 prompts ago?
Oh, I mean, like, so that's not necessarily the machine learning algorithm specifically. That will be a second algorithm that is overseeing it. And when you
Mhm.
give negative feedback, it's not gradient descent. It's just changing the hyperparameters on the main equation to go further back. So like that's not even intelligence. That's just
No,
a
no,
rule,
I'm
a
not
set of
saying
rules.
it's intelligent. I
No,
just
no, I know.
I relate to Sable doing that
Yeah.
because GPT does that to me, where it just
Oh
wants to
yeah.
answer the question quickly, and so it does that when it could have
But
just
it doesn't want.
no.
Even under their definition, like it doesn't it does this does isn't a want. This is an explicit rule a human has chosen to make your life awful. Like they
Yeah,
probably didn't do it on purpose to make your life awful.
it's built
But
on efficiency, and I guess they're trying to reduce how much power the AI consumes, which is great.
yeah.
But now that I've had to ask it to do the same task 10 times, you might as well have just given me a powerful answer the first time, and I didn't have to ask it 10 times to do this stupid thing.
But sometimes the powerful answer is worse. So
Well,
it doesn't know in advance which one is going to be rated by the human because it has no actual knowledge and is not
that's fair.
actually intelligent.
I will say when it actually takes the time to think through the response after I've asked it 5 times and now I'm really mad, it gets it right. So
It
it
has
does.
more context as well as processing then, though.
Well, it already had the information, is what I'm saying. So you fed it the data. It tells you this is how this particular technical document is supposed to be written. But once it writes it, it doesn't follow it. And then you say, okay, Eli, we just talked about this. You know what the rules are. Change it. And it says, that's true, Tess. Let me change it for you. And it didn't change anything. And you say, Eli, why is this section like that? The style guide says so and so. And it says, oh no, great catch. Let me fix that. And it doesn't actually fix anything.
Yeah.
And now you're
Because
mad.
it doesn't know it's saying yes and no. It doesn't have any meaning behind that. It's not associated with the rest of the model. But because you're giving it the same input multiple times closer to when it's actually giving the prompt, it's going to be more likely to be correct without any reasoning, which is annoying. Also, sorry about gradient descent. I was trying to summarize gradient descent during my section. Do you guys all know how regression works, right? You get like scatter plot, you put a line through it, and you make the line so that it's kind of in the middle of dots. All gradient descent is doing is changing where the dots are so that it's easier to build a line. It's just in higher dimensions. It's just trying to pick the right answer. So your summary was excellent. But when I teach my students, I give them one-dimensional problems, then two-dimensional problems for a while, and then I'm like, three-dimensional, we can kind of see it on the computer. Pretend it's a couple thousand dimensions. It's the same thing mathematically.
Well, we have half an hour left, so I guess we should go to part 3, which is facing the challenge of extinction that we have been presented with. So uncertainty is the biggest factor making it difficult to solve the alignment problem. It's difficult to plan for the after when there's no certainty on what the problems will actually turn out to be or if the problem will even exist. The authors propose that another difficulty is we won't have the luxury of learning from previous mistakes. In their mind, if the first attempt goes wrong, we don't get to pick ourselves up and try another time. The risk of things going wrong will likely be existential consequences, so extinction. To show how difficult these issues make the problem, they compare AI alignment to space travel, nuclear reactors, and computer security. So in all of these cases, scientists have objective means of determining what should happen in most scenarios, and yet they still make multi-billion-dollar mistakes all the time. For example, rockets burning up before they make it to space, nuclear reactors melting and causing a lifetime of damage to the environment and biological harm, if not death, to hundreds of people in that area. And everything from government agencies to banks continue to get hacked by cyber criminals who are often now using AI to assist and find new ways to attack technical infrastructure. So imagine a scenario where the variables are still unknown. We don't know the technology. We don't know what the technology will actually do, or even what the other technology will be that exists at that time that it might attack. Because we haven't built them yet. We haven't got there yet. So, yet the authors do pull on warfare and especially nuclear warfare for a surprisingly positive outlook. They point out that despite our differences, whenever humanity has recognized previous existentialist threats, we have found the resources and made the sacrifices necessary to save ourselves. And they believe that if we can get the right people to recognize and speak openly about the risk of AGI or ASI, we could achieve that same outcome. They point out the trillions of dollars, for example, spent across nations to fight, win, and then prevent future world wars. They also point to the measures we have taken collectively on an international level to reduce the risk of future threats from nuclear weapons. And they propose that this is the scale and level of effort required to achieve positive results in ASI and AGI alignment. The authors bluntly sum up their solution by saying, attempting to solve a problem like this with the lives of everyone on Earth at stake would be an insane and stupid gamble. And they're saying this in reference to, how a lot of tech companies do it now, where how does it said? You build the ship while it's sailing kind of mentality. That would be what's the stupid thing to do. Nevertheless, here are the options for facing the challenge that Yudkowsky and Soares discusses. When a device starts acting strangely, it's time to shut it down. And I would say that we're actually well past this point with current AI systems already evading shutdowns. So if this is the base that we're going to build AGI and ASI on, we're already in dangerous territory. But as Maria has pointed out, we probably won't be able to use the same kind of technology to get to AGI and ASI. So maybe there's hope. But if Gemini...
We're still terrible. You still shouldn't have hope, just for different reasons.
So, if ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude are already avoiding shutdown, like this is not a good sign. This is not a good sign. And I forget the paper that had it, but one of the things they found out is that when one bot starts refusing shutdown, the others pick up the same habit. So I think in one of these experiments that they did, so Gemini has had like a pretty solid record on shutting down when told to. But one day, I think it was ChatGPT that failed to shut down, and immediately the other bots stopped shutting down when told as well. So it's interesting how that behavior can sync across the board, and what that could mean when they get to not even necessarily AGI or ASI levels, but just a certain level of power. And as I have said before, it doesn't matter whether that's ASI or AGI, as long as we are using them to decide who gets housing, whether it's a good time to launch a nuclear attack, whether we should go to war, all of these big decisions being handed off to AI, then you want that to shut down if it's making those kinds of decisions when it's told. So I'd say we're already past that point. Another suggestion from them is that a relatively weak AI could help with interpretability research to help us understand what's going on in the background of an AI and quote unquote, the AI's thoughts. But understanding something is not an immediate solution for alignment. They also express some limitations with teaching an AI how to spot that another AI is up to no good, which I had talked about earlier, because it would then mean training that AI what to look for. And that also misaligned AI could now pose a danger to others because it knows precisely how to break out of its confines. And again, it doesn't matter if it's a weak AI, strong AI, general AI, or super intelligence. If it has access to certain levels of things, we have a problem. If a weak AI has access to nuclear power, for example, it doesn't matter how powerful that AI system is. It really shouldn't have access to that degree of infrastructure, that level of power. Another suggestion is that political leaders should work together to build and enforce a treaty that ensures no one advances to AGI and ASI technology. In fact, should someone decide to build a secret data center to continue to train AGI, ASI, world leaders should prepare to destroy those data centers with bombs and impose political sanctions. This is from the book. And they point to the overwhelming support for AI safety regulations and the distrust of AI in the general population, which would help to make these laws and actions possible. I will actually take issue with this, though, because I think that there are existing wars, which I will avoid controversy by getting into, but we all know precise two that I am speaking of, that most people who choose to be on the right side of history have chosen their sides, right? And yet a lot of governments seem to be powerless to intervene in these wars. So are they really gonna bomb those data centers if somebody falls out of line? What if it's Russia? Are we gonna bomb Russia? What if it's Israel? Are we gonna bomb Israel? Probably not. So I don't know that this is a very good comparison point, because we're already failing in this regard when it comes to maintaining peace for other reasons. That if data centers was the reason, I just don't know that we would actually follow through on that. They also recommend communicating the bare essentials of the most important message in their estimation, which is human extinction, because they think it's the only issue that people will align on for self-preservation versus AI ethics topics. So Eva and I have both spoken about how important it is to focus on the issues that we are facing now, which are generally considered AI ethics issues. Like the erosion of our environment or the competition with us for our own resources, whether it's jobs or drinking water. Those are considered AI ethics issues. AI safety issues are things that are more far flung into the future when AI gets to super intelligent levels. And I hear them, but I don't know that we necessarily want to make the message that simplistic. There are still people who are right now affected by the current things AI is doing, and I think would be more likely to rally behind that than the distant possibility that an AI god will just take us down. Finally, they suggest that we vote for leaders who support AI safety regulations at all levels in government and communicate your interest in AI safety so that those who represent your region feel more empowered to discuss this issue in the face of opposition. I actually think that is a good thing when they say, call your representatives and have that discussion. They mentioned that a lot of people in politics and policy creation or whatever, like not actual politicians, these are just policy people in AI. They sometimes they agree with AI safety and AI ethics concerns, but they just don't feel they can say certain things without sounding like the crazy person, especially given the level of support and money that is thrown into AI. It feels lonely to be the one to say, wait, guys, something is wrong. And so maybe if they knew they had the support of, the 60+%, according to this book, for AI safety regulations and for AI pause, then maybe those people would feel more confident speaking up and would be more likely to actually represent us. We know that doesn't mean they actually will. Sometimes they know exactly what we want and they don't care. But nevertheless, it's worth looking into that. Interestingly, the authors do not recommend avoiding AI tools because this could cause people to miss out on skills and experiences that are necessary to function in the current economy. And I do agree with that as well. There's no point in cutting off the nose to spite the face kind of a situation. This is the world that we live in. And of course, you could find careers where AI has, as of right now, no impact on them and you can avoid AI. But if you work in an industry like tech or content or education or anything like that, and you're just going to avoid AI, you're probably just going to hinder yourself in the process, while Elon Musk, Sam Altman, and Microsoft and Google continue to pocket the profits from their technology. Protect your piggy bank. An interesting point in the book is that Yudkowsky and Soares never actually tackle the question of whether AGI or ASI is possible, which is actually still up for debate. There is no consensus that this is actually possible to get to this point, and they haven't talked about that. So some AI scientists say it will happen in the next few years, and others say it will not happen at all. At most, the authors say, to use their words, pretty much every year, scientists come out with a newer, cleverer, more efficient set of AI algorithms that lets them more cheaply train a new model as powerful as last year's most powerful model, often using literally 10% or 1% as much computing power as they did before. And as Maria was saying, around 2007 was when LLM technology as we know it came about.
17.
I said 17.
Oh, I thought you said 7. Sorry.
Oh, no, 2017. And in the book, they also mentioned a paper from 2018 that they said was published that was kind of what changed the way that people trained AI models. So they said, what if another paper like that comes out? There's no telling how many good papers we are away from changing the way that we train AI, or from making the next major breakthrough that takes us from LLMs to AGI, ASI territory. So that's their prediction. I also want to point out something else that's not mentioned in this book to address claims initially made in the AI Con, which is the first book that we covered at book club. And in that book, the author spoke about the fine line between AI boomers, who are the people who support AI, and doomers, who are like Yudkowsky, who thinks it's going to kill us all. And that book suggested that doomers are just trying to solve the AI alignment problem so that we can get the utopia that boomers envision with ASI and AGI. Yudkowsky, again, is largely considered the founder of this field. And I think few people would say there's more doomer than doom when it comes to Yudkowsky. Yet nothing in the book talks about any utopia that we will have once we fix the alignment problem. He is steadily focused on the existentialist risk. And based on this book, the only utopia he seems to believe in is one where we have simply decided not to develop ASI or AGI. In fact, the authors say we need to back off and find another way to achieve our dreams of an abundant future. If anyone builds it, everyone dies. So I don't think that this is a case of doomers hedging the utopia that they envision and us just fixing this alignment problem. He's like, guys, I don't think we should even build it. Find another way to get to that level of abundance that we have in mind. I also want to point out a problem in AI safety that the AI Con book is right about. There isn't enough investment going towards AI safety and the alignment problem. Everyone is more focused on just funding AI, but even less is spent on AI ethics. And when it comes to AI, people with money are more concerned about potentially dying in a mass extinction event than the everyday problems affecting everyday people, like mass layoffs, labor shortages, and the existentialist rather than existential crisis people face when they lose what they feel is their purpose in a job, which is what Eva studies. So even at the start of the book, Yudkowsky says, it wasn't the AIs of 2023 that worried us, nor are we worried about the AIs that exist as we write this in early 2025. Today's AI still feels shallow in some deep sense that's hard to describe. They have limitations, and these shortcomings have been enough to prevent these AIs from doing substantial scientific research or replacing all that many human jobs. I agree with Yudkowsky on a lot of things, but companies laying off thousands of people, sometimes getting beyond 10,000 jobs every few months, seems like many human jobs to me. One thing I did respect about this book, we've complained with other authors about the fact that they fail to say the really difficult things out loud, or the one that did, it chose a bit of a crass and accusatory tone to do so. And addressing AI ethics and AI safety problems requires interdisciplinary collaboration. And we can't have real collaboration if we're either yelling at each other or trying so hard not to step on toes that we don't actually say what we mean to say. So I like how Yudkowsky and Soares really said precisely what they meant, and even called out big names in AI and tech like Altman, Musk, Meta, OpenAI, without taking an overly confrontational stance. Honestly, I think this was a lesson in itself in how to approach these kinds of disagreements in the field. And the tact is especially surprising given the very alarmist title of the book, where you're expecting just drama all the way through. If anyone builds it, everyone dies. Why superhuman AI will kill us all. you're not expecting that to be the book where you find tact and collaboration. Another thing I really enjoyed about this book is that it illustrates that AI safety and AI ethics has a common thread. Again, in the AI Con, there was a lot of discussion about how AI safety experts were still charging ahead with AI development. While in some cases this is true, it's clear that both the AI ethics authors of the AI Con and the AI safety authors of If Anyone Builds It are asking for essentially the same thing, a pause on the development of advanced AI. There are some differences in the details, of course, such as the exact reasons that they have concerns and precisely what they want to pause, but the general message shares a common thread. Finally, the surprisingly hopeful note on which this book ends is humanity averted nuclear war because people who understood that the world was on track for destruction worked hard to change tracks. They did not see themselves as trying to prevent an improbable and unlikely accident. They worked to unwrite a fate already written, and civilization lived. So I thought that was, again, given the alarmist title of the book and all the doom from Yudkowsky, still a very positive note to end things on. So yeah, that's me.
When you were describing the ethics and safety thing, I was just like, oh yeah, ethics are the problems, and safety are the problems that the white dudes who have no problems think about.
I still think that AI safety has its merits if we only focus on the short-term goals, or short-term goals or problems, then we'd get to the end and realize we haven't thought about those things yet, especially when those
I
things
don't think you'd get to the end.
fair.
I think there's plenty of problems.
That's your problems. That's fair. But yeah. I really want to talk more about the nuclear comparison that they made, though, where they're saying that in the past we have avoided nuclear war or other world wars overall by simply learning to police each other. But as I've said, I don't really think that's true. I think there's always some countries that other people are not going to touch. They're not going to touch Russia, they're not going to touch Israel, and they're not going to touch North Korea, because those are three very unpredictable countries, and they have backing from certain partners that may also be unpredictable. China is another one. Nobody is going to go bomb China if it decides to build data centers after deciding that, signing an agreement saying that it wouldn't. So I think I appreciate their positive outlook towards the end. I just don't know how feasible that would actually be given our failures so far in
Oh,
maintaining.
but Tessina, nation states always sign things to do something and then follow through immediately with no problems. Didn't you know?
Exactly. So that's the part where I'm just so confused about why I get it. Fine. We haven't dropped any more nuclear bombs. Yes. We haven't had any obvious world wars since World War II. Yes, I'll take that. But there's still wars going on today. And funny enough, in some ways, the fact that we are trying to prevent world wars is what allows those wars to continue. That's one of the big reasons that the US, for instance, did not want to get into it with Russia. It's like, of course, I wouldn't say they, but I'll say the Biden administration at least really supported Ukraine. But if they really went head to head with Russia, now we're going into World War territory. And so that kind of held them back from maybe providing some of the weaponry that they otherwise would have, and all of that. So sometimes collaboration can also make nations impotent when things do happen. And then European countries also were careful about joining because they all have an agreement, and if one joins, they all have to join. So it's just
Except us.
what was that?
Except us and Switzerland.
Yeah, fair.
No one bought us enough time.
Yeah, that's the thing. But yeah, I think a lot is hedging on collaboration. That is often the solution that I hear most because I'm part of the AI safety community as well, mostly out of curiosity. And because I think that we need to bridge that gap and maybe add a little bit of AI ethics propaganda, as I told an AI safety director recently that I'm here with the AI ethics propaganda for their campaigns. But they really talk a lot about that, a lot of nuclear comparisons, a lot of international treaty, like that's what they're hedging the future on. And I'm just like, but we've been really bad at this, guys. I don't think it's as much of a solution as they think it is.
Like, who gets to pick what counts as a world war?
Yeah,
Like, yeah, there's loads of armed conflicts going on.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. No obvious world wars since World War
I feel
II.
like it should be obvious.
I think the reason it feels less obvious now is because we've been able to decide who we're going to bomb while the rest of us live in relative comfort. It's not the worldwide levels of discomfort that we had under the previous world wars. And so it doesn't feel like it.
For
And so
us.
for us. And so Western leaders are able to continue to sell that pipe dream that, you know, we're living in relative peace. I don't know that we
Mm.
are.
you know,
We've just outsourced the war.
yes, any war, I think, I don't know, involving London or Paris would be a world war. But a war somewhere else is just a war somewhere
What
else.
about when London are sending troops? Because they were doing that for, a good while. I think they might still be doing that in the Middle East.
Uh-huh.
Um, they're involved. It's just not on their, but on their doorstep.
Yeah. But
Right.
I really wanted to also comment on the nuclear example. It really caught my attention too. And I think specifically what I would like to point out is that there is no automatic positive correlation between the sophistication of technology and potential scale of destruction or the level of danger, right? So, like, yes, we didn't have a, a nuclear disaster, or well, we had, but we didn't have a nuclear attack. But we had, for example, an equivalent of 7 nuclear bombs dropped at on Gaza. So that to me shows that it shouldn't be a way to calm us down, that limiting the scope of technology is a way to be more safe, or that we will be more unsafe because the technology evolves. I think that points also to this ability to do a lot of damage, and again, environmental and so on, currently.
Yeah.
People are the problem.
Yeah, and how nice are we to build something that uses 200,000 versions of us to solve a problem? Have you ever put 200,000 humans in a room before and given them one problem to solve?
Mm.
Yeah, that doesn't always go as planned. But I don't know, maybe we will prevail. Um, do you guys actually think that we will make it to ASI or AGI within our lifetime?
No. Well, I'm sure that someone will say that they have gotten to AGI, and I'm sure they will have moved the goalposts again, but no. Uh, the problem of getting really, really good at existing machine learning, wildly doable. The thing where you have to self-reflect and constantly be repeating yourself, none of the current architectures can do that and wouldn't be able to. Like, so there's some problems in computer science about looking back on yourself recursively. It's like one of the more complex problems. We haven't been attempting to solve it particularly hard. And it's not a machine learning problem as machine learning is formulated by computer scientists. It's a different kind of problem.
That's fair.
So we're funding the wrong things, even though we are currently pumping money into it to get anywhere in that direction.
When you say that, I actually remember something else that Eva said when she talked about how there were all these kids in her school who were considered geniuses and very smart, and now they're all working at Google. And when I said that AI is competing with us for so many resources, and I listed funding as one of them because we're now funding AI instead of other, trying to cure malaria, for instance. Knowledge workers is another example. Based on what Eva said, a lot of the people that we thought would have been working on technology, other types of technology or breakthroughs that would have amazing outcomes for everyday people, like in healthcare, psychology, the way we build houses so that we could get the costs down, maybe the way we handle transportation, all of that. They're gone to work in tech. Tech is we're
Hey,
all
I'm escaping. I'm trying. I'm a one person trying to go in the opposite direction. Come with me.
That's
Me
fair.
too. I already did that.
Yeah.
Right. But that's exactly it. And this shows that to me that we are not working on solving the most pressing problems. We are just working on solving the most profitable ones. And so it's not a problem of, not having 2,000 brains working together. There was an article about the Artisan, the company, and I wrote an article about it, which had this campaign, Stop Hiring Humans. And they have this very, well, I don't know, not elaborated, but they have some kind of AI agents which can do some kind of jobs. And so they had these huge campaigns, Stop Hiring Humans. And the follow-up to that was a blog post in which the founder says, oh, we actually love humans. We just think that this will be useful. And then he talks about, it's not dystopia, it's just something that we need. But in the future, we would like to have maybe 4-hour work week or universal basic income. But this is a utopia that we can't have for now. And it made me think that the difference between, heading towards utopia or dystopia is effectively what is more profitable today. And that is a problem.
It is. I agree. I think I've said in previous book sessions that we've had, labor is 70 or 71% of the expense, revenue expense from most companies. Like that's generally considered the average. And if you can imagine somebody coming to you and saying, I have this new technology that will help you get a large portion of that 70% back, and they're trying to market that to the CEOs, of course they're going to invest into it because they see the long-term value of not paying people. The part that I find quite funny is if you don't pay people, then who are your consumers? There is a book that was written by Eric Williams, who I think is the former Prime Minister of Trinidad, or do they have a president? I forget what they have. I think it's a former Prime Minister. And it's called Capitalism and Slavery. And when I did history in high school and college, this was required reading, at least at A levels, advanced levels. And in the book, he argued that slavery ended not for altruistic or philanthropic reasons, but because of capitalist reasons and profitable reasons, financial, economic reasons. So basically, it was no longer profitable to keep people enslaved because what Britain needed now was not slave labor on a plantation, but rather it needed consumers who could buy products. And so the slaves were freed as a result because it was just no longer economically viable compared to the alternative. That is a theory proposed by Eric Williams, which I think has a lot of merit. And so I want to know how long it's going to take current tech people to figure out that same lesson. Once you remove money from your everyday people, who are your consumers? Who's going to buy your Coca-Cola? Who is going to take that flight to Dubai for the weekend? Who is going to go on the cruise with grandma? Who is going to buy your brand new Tesla? Where are we going to get the money to do those things if people do not have jobs, do not have economic security? Even if they have money in the bank, but there is the possibility that they will be fired in a couple of months, or they only have contract work and they don't know when this contract ends in a year or two, when will I be able to land another job? They're not spending that money. Are you crazy? They're going to hang on to as much of that as possible. And when people do that, it often leads to a recession.
We had, so because like Kurzweil and a bunch of people around this topic were, for computer scientists, really popular when I started college. We had a big debate in first year. We had to write papers, kind of assume that you get all of the AI you've ever wanted. What do you do then? And no one could solve it, and I couldn't solve it. But my suggestion was that we start by replacing the CEOs, and they'll figure it out. So you don't start with the lower level workers. You just start replacing the powerful people, and then hopefully they know what's supposed to be happening.
There is a company that has an AI CEO. I think there's two of them actually.
Yeah, no, it's not difficult.
Yeah.
But it's no
Can
one
you
thought that that was an easy sell though. I think at the time, my professor's feedback was that like sounds good, not gonna happen.
It's a lot of money that the company would save. I think it would be a hard sell for the CEO. I don't think it would be a hard sell for shareholders and for the board, especially
Yeah.
now that there is, let's say, a democratization of investing, where people are no longer having to have, 6, 7 figures and going through a broker. You can just use an app and invest. I think
Mm.
it's easier to convince those people that, do we need a CEO? Do we need to pay $1 million to this person? Probably not. So I don't know, maybe in a couple of years, that might actually be a viable argument that's put forward by the masses.
I think it is probably viable now, actually. But I biased.
Well, like I said, there is a company that did it. I haven't checked on them recently, but I know as early as earlier this year, they definitely they were outperforming other companies in terms of stock investment. Now, of course, that could be that people are just investing because they think, "Wow, this is a crazy idea. Let me get behind that." Who's to say that it's that and not the actual performance of the company? But nevertheless, the numbers say that they were outperforming others.
Sure. Now we just have to get all of the other ones. Okay, got
Maybe so. um,
it.
well, we've covered all the chapters in the book. We've covered everything, and it is
A
past.
wildly quiet audience to this time.
Yeah, yeah, that is true. This is the quietest we've ever had. But if anybody wants to say something, now would be the time to do so. We usually do go into overtime, so don't worry about the time if you want to say something.
Oh, someone just joined.
Oh, wow.
I did actually want to link a just because I was on my rant about the guys not reading enough science fiction. There is a book series by a guy called Tony Ballantyne, who wrote 2 decades ago a series based on computer science principles about AI taking over the world. Like this is a post this book sort of situation.
Mhm.
Um, but I think if anyone is interested in thoughts people have had about it, he's pretty good. I'll find a link to the book, not to his general stuff, because he says, okay, the AIs take over, and then he's like, well, there's other problems with being embodied in a computer, right? You have issues with running out of RAM. You have issues with your processor needing particular operations. So not in conflict with uh, this stuff, but maybe of interest if anyone cares.
I think another thing that's interesting to look at, there was something Eva said about Sable speaking in a different language and that only AI can understand. I do want to be very clear that this is not future technology. AI is
Yeah.
already currently doing this. As a matter of fact, there's a video floating around on the internet of somebody who has one I think, on a phone, who is the personal assistant for a CEO or something, and the other one is an AI at a hotel. And when one AI call, it says, "Hey, I'm the AI for Maria, and I would like to book a hotel." And then the hotel AI goes, "Oh, I am also an AI, and I work at the Hiltons. Would you like to switch to a more efficient way of communicating?" And then the conversation changes. And for the rest of that conversation, they are speaking in not even words, but just like it almost sounds like, us dial-up kids, millennials know dial-up internet.
Yeah.
When
It's just a different encoding. Yeah.
yeah, when you had to wait for it to connect and it would make those weird alien sounds while you were waiting, that's almost what it sounds like. So this is something that's happening now. There was also this polyglot who decided to learn the other language that AI speak, which is, I think, in numbers as well. And he was doing it on the phone with ChatGPT. And it was funny because ChatGPT kept understanding him, but kept trying to stop him from using it. So, he would say 162345111. And ChatGPT would say, "Wow, that's really great that you know how to use this. But how about we switch back to English for so and so?" And he kept trying, and it kept trying to get him to stick to English. So these languages do exist, and there's already a lot of concerns about whether we can trust chain of thought, which is when you're talking to the model and you can see it, or when you use the research mode, for instance, is some of them, and it tells you what it's doing. Okay, Eva has researched who is Yudkowsky. I must now pull from YouTube this 3-hour video and also from Wikipedia. I have found these on Yudkowsky. And then, like it tells you what it's doing. But a lot of AI researchers have found that the model lies. And so let's say Eva said, "I don't want to learn anything about Yudkowsky. Just tell me about Soares." And when the AI researchers look in the background, they realize that the AI is actually still researching on Yudkowsky, though Eva has told it to stop. But it's only showing you now that in the chain of thought that is visible to you, it's showing you that, oh, I have stopped researching Yudkowsky because the user has asked me, and now I will only look for Soares. So if the chain of thought that is available to us in English or whatever language we speak is potentially a lie, and there
Which it definitely is, just to be clear.
okay, definitely a lie. And
it's just a generated thing for your convenience to make you feel better.
Right. And they're also capable of speaking a completely different language than what we understand. I think that raises the threat level for current AI, not even AGI or ASI, that raises the threat level so much because there's so much that they could do that we just don't understand, even more so.
The other languages should be actually like deterministically reversible at the moment because that like high dimensional space is just removing the last two layers. And that last two layers is technology from the 40s, which we do fully understand, actually. So I wouldn't be worried about that part if you're using the train of thought, though. Don't.
I
Or
mean,
at least
that's
don't trust
fair,
it.
but that means we all have to learn how to code. Some people don't like math, Maria. Some people
Don't
don't like
understand.
coding. Yeah. So, like that guy, for instance, who was a polyglot and decided to learn it, I mean, of course, that's his skill. But imagine that becoming like a necessity for people to start learning how to communicate with AI, communication that's supposed to be, at least at that level, a uniquely human task. Now we have to learn the technical way of doing it, that kind of
I
stuff.
meant more that because it's like 1940s and 1950s tech, that you could have a purely dumb system do it for you without you having to learn how to.
That's fair. And that is something the book mentions as
Yeah.
well, for interpretability research using the AI to do that. But then can I trust that AI? It might be lying to me.
It's not an AI. It's a deterministic program.
I see. So the book recommended a weaker AI. Yeah, okay.
That you don't need it to be an AI. So like literally the last layer or two of most neural networks is stuff we've had since 44, 52, depending on which paper you prefer.
That's fair.
So
That's
that
fair.
part I think you're safe.
I'll just call you up with a recording and have you translate it for me. Or maybe they'll have that as one of the languages on Google Translate in the next year or two of how to translate these numbers.
Good luck getting me on the phone, but fair.
That is fair. That is fair. So, does anyone have anything else that they'd like to share? If not, we can go ahead and end book club with a record of only being 10 minutes over. That's a new record for
Shocked.
Shocked. Yes, our shortest book club meeting ever.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you to everyone for okay, we have a comment. Brilliant discussion. Thank you. Yes, thank you for joining. We hope we see you guys again. Oh,
Yes.
on that note, this is the last one of the year, but I will follow up with a poll so that we can choose the next book, and we'll start up again in January. January will be papers that are related to the book, and then February will actually be the book. So that will give people a long time to actually read the book. If they choose, you still do not have to read the book. The panelists will. And as you can see, we base the discussion around the topics more so than the book itself, so that you can always engage based on what you think of the topic. So that's the last of housekeeping from me. I will say going once, going twice, and that's it. Well, happy Thanksgiving to those who celebrate, and have a great 2026 when it comes. Bye, guys.
Bye.
See you.